Hi everyone, welcome to Mountain Home Stories. As many of you know that I am currently reading Anna Alice Chapin's The True Story of Humpty Dumpty. New listeners can find the previous episodes there in my channel under the playlist of Humpty Dumpty. And in the previous episode, I'd read that the wicked king calls the children impudent creatures and upstarts, but he might be underestimating what these children from the real world are capable of. And this is exactly what we are going to find out today. And yes, this is going to be the last episode as well. So I hope you are very much eager to know what happens in the end. And yes, of course, I hope that you enjoyed the story and may it serve as a refined tool for sharpening your English as we read together. A gentle reminder, if you haven't subscribed yet to Mountain Home Stories, then please consider subscribing. And now, without further delay, let's just dive into the last episode. Chapter 15, By the City Wall. The three escaping friends did not know what to do. Bab had used up all her sand, and there seemed no way left to overcome their enemies. Meanwhile, the crowd in front of them was snarling threats and mocking words. "I will be the one to kill them," cried one. "No, I!" exclaimed another. I!" shouted everybody at once. "Hush!" said someone sharply. "The king himself is coming." And everyone became silent. They were all deeply disappointed, for they knew that now the wicked king would insist on killing the children himself, and none of them would stand a chance of getting that promised half of his kingdom. Suddenly, an idea came to Bab. "Dick," she whispered, "we must try to get the wicked king to put us in prison or something like that." "Why?" asked Dick gloomily. "I think that it would be much nicer to be killed at once and get it over." "Oh, but Dick," Bab breathed eagerly into his ear. "Don't you remember the tiny piece of wood that I told you about? The piece of magic wood from the wooden cow's horn? Well, I have it still, and Santa Claus said that it was a very powerful weapon to have, and if we can only see the wicked king alone, I'll throw it at him, and I'm sure from what Santa Claus said that it will do something awful to him." "Why not throw it at him now?" suggested Dick, "just to see what it will do." "Because, don't you see, then we'd have all these other dreadful people to fight, and we have nothing at all left after this splinter of wood goes. No, we must try to see the wicked king all by himself." "I see," exclaimed Dick. And at that moment, the wicked king strode up to them with his long, bright, sharp sword drawn, and a fiendish smile on his wicked old face.
"How nice of you," said the wicked king, "to stand against a wall. It is ever so much easier to kill a person when he stands against a wall."
"Oh, your majesty," cried Dick, "don't kill us until you have heard our story." He was talking at random, of course, to gain time, but he succeeded in making the wicked king stop short for a moment to listen.
"Oh, well,"
said the wicked king,
"I would not mind hearing your story. As a matter of fact, if it happens to be an interesting one."
For this was the one weakness of the wicked king. He loved stories, almost as much, indeed, as did a certain great ruler in the East, of whom you will read one of these days in one of the most splendid wonder books ever written by any man.
"Is it an interesting one?"
he demanded. "Oh, yes," said Dick, seeing his advantage. "It's a splendid story."
"Of course you understand," said the king, "that you will both be beheaded just as soon as you are finished. I should not like to encourage any false hopes."
"Oh, we quite understand," said Dick, looking hard at the drawn sword in the king's hand. In his own mind, he decided firmly that in any case he would not finish the story for a very long time.
"I should really like to hear," the wicked king went on, "how you stole my daughter and sent my soldiers to sleep, and how you chased my brownies away from their work, and did all the other extraordinary and impertinent things which you have done. You are dangerous creatures, but you are unusual, and I think you are worth keeping alive for an hour or so, as long as I have an army to watch you while you talk."
Then he sat down on a large rock and folded his arms.
"Begin,"
he commanded. Dick was at his wits' end. Of course, he had expected that the wicked king would have them sent to prison. Instead, he was expected to tell his tale surrounded by hundreds of people. How in the world was Bab to make use of her magic splint of wood under such conditions as these? The princess, who had been silent all this time, came very unexpectedly to the rescue. "Revered parent," she said, for that was what the wicked king liked her to call him. "I beg you to first take me back to my tower, from which these creatures have dragged me against my will." The wicked king looked at her sharply. He was not at all sure that she had been dragged away. However, she looked as innocent as possible, and he called 2 men-at-arms to him.
"Escort the princess back to her tower,"
he commanded.
"Now, creatures, tell your story."
But just then, when everything seemed most hopeless, a big bird was seen flying toward them, quite high up in the air, and the next moment, Busy Buzz's head appeared over the wall, and he whispered excitedly, "Meg is coming with the spell! Hold out a minute longer!" All this time, Humpty Dumpty had not said a word. In fact, he could not see even what was going on, because his back was turned to the others. But at the word spell, he suddenly lifted up his voice and shouted wildly, "The spell! The spell! Now I shall be free! Oh, Princess Star, do you hear? I shall be free!" I hear, dear Humpty," cried Princess Star. "And I shall be free too, for I am sure that a really good spell can rescue us both."
"Undutiful daughter!"
shouted the wicked king, waving his sword.
"How dare you talk like that with an egg?"
He spoke with contempt as well as rage. "He is not an egg," sobbed the princess, hiding her face in a satin sleeve and spoiling the embroidery with her tears. "He is my own poor angel Humpty Dumpty, and I'll talk to him just exactly as much as I choose." The big bird had been drawing nearer and nearer all this time, and now swooped down to the top of the wall. It alighted close to Humpty Dumpty. Dick and Bab could see that it was Moon Eyes the owl, and that he bore upon his back their sister Meg. As they watched, she waved a bright blue paper and cried, "Dick, Bab, I'm here! Are you both quite safe?" With his sword upraised, the wicked king rushed forward upon the 2 children. Wiggles barked and snapped at his legs. All the men-at-arms shouted, and the princess screamed loudly. "No!" cried one of the men. "Watch their heads drop off!" But at that moment, Bab threw the scrap of wood that she had straight in the wicked king's face, and he stopped stock still, his hand still up in the air. The sword dropped to the earth. Everyone cried out, "What has happened?" The wicked king's face got queerer and queerer, stiffer and stiffer. His eyes stared. His wicked smile was frozen on his lips. The wicked king was turned to wood. "Run, run!" cried Dick, seeing that now they had but one chance. "Follow Meg with the spell," he shouted, and he and Bab and the princess ran like the wind along the city wall. Just then Mudge came flying down the city street. "Oh, please," he called at the top of his lungs, "don't forget that you are going to save me too." Meg, riding furiously upon Moon Eyes, had reached the gate. The men-at-arms and courtiers and gentlemen-in-waiting and all the other citizens of the Red City had started in pursuit and were gaining on them every moment. "Come with us, Mudge!" shouted Dick, and Mudge brought up the rear of the flying procession. Behind them on the wall, Humpty Dumpty was shrieking. "You aren't all going off without rescuing me after all?" "The gate!" cried Busybuzz to Dick. "Meg's spell will open it." As they all rushed toward the big iron gate, Meg hastily unrolled the scroll of sky blue paper and read out at the top of her voice, and so fast that no one could understand a word, the lines of the Fairy Queen's spell. And when she came to the words, "Shut, bolt, shut, gate, yield up your contents straight," there was a queer, clicking, clattering, creaking sound. The great gate of the Red City swung slowly open. The fugitives dashed out and closed it behind them with a crash, and stood there on the safe side, panting and gasping as their pursuers came shouting up to the gate on the inside. It must have been a very strong gate, for nearly all the inhabitants of the Red City threw themselves against it and shook it, but it would not give a hair's breadth. They all howled with fury, but the children were safe. Then suddenly they all turned and dashed back the way they had come. "Look out for Humpty Dumpty!" shouted Dick. "They'll try to do something to harm him if we don't take care." "Oh, my poor angel!" wailed the princess. "What shall we do?" "Pile on Moon Eyes!" cried Dick to Bab and Mudge. The three children sprang onto the owl, and the princess and Wiggles hurried along the ground. Busybuzz darted ahead, his wings humming like little electric fans. "Here is the spell!" cried Meg, giving Dick the blue paper. "You only have to read it over him, and you must strike him with something hard and sharp at the same time." Dick seized the paper and pulled his jackknife out of his pocket. Then he stood up on Moon Eye's back so that he could be ready to jump the moment they were anywhere near the wall and Humpty Dumpty. When they reached the poor egg, he was almost cracked with terror. His agonized expression had made big creases in the eggshell, and he was squeaking, "Help! Help! Help!" in a high, faint voice. The men were just climbing up the wall on the inside, so really there was some excuse for his fear. "Quick!" cried Bab and Meg, speaking both at once. And Dick took a flying leap from the back of the owl to the top of the city wall. "Don't forget to break the shell!" cried Meg. He held up his knife to show her that he was prepared. The head of one of the men-at-arms appeared over the edge of the wall. His hand was outstretched. Dick jabbed the huge eggshell with his jackknife and began to read the spell so rapidly that it was a wonder that it could work at all. But it did. The egg toppled, cracked, and fell crashing to the earth. "Hurry down yourself!" cried Bab in terror. "That man will kill you!" The man-at-arms had drawn a dagger and was trying to reach Dick. "Oh, I don't think he will kill me," laughed Dick, and slipped over the edge of the wall into the mass of delicate vine tendrils where the fairy flowers were blooming. "Help me!" he cried, and came down so quickly that there could be no question about its being magic. He reached the earth just in time to see a slender young man in doublet and hose rise from the heap of eggshells and rush with outstretched hands to meet the princess. It was Prince Humpty Dumpty, free at last! Chapter 16 Behind the Reindeer. By this time, Bab and Meg had sprung to the earth, and they all joined in a cheer of joy. "Goodbye to you," cried Mudge. "I'm going back to my father, the sea kobold. He has been expecting me for hundreds of years, and he will get me some new scales. Thank you very much for helping me to get away. Goodbye, goodbye." And he was off. The sea of glass was close at hand, and Dick imagined that he could see the sea kobold's anxious head sticking up through the hole in the glass and watching what was happening on shore. "There's no time to be lost even now," declared Busybuzz. "Hurry, all of you." Several of the men-at-arms had reached the top of the wall, and the children could hear one of them calling for the big key that opened the gate, and horses on which to hunt down the escaping ones. "Hurry!" said Busybuzz even more anxiously, and they all ran as fast as they could in the direction of the wood. Busybuzz flew on ahead, calling to them to hurry. Next came Humpty Dumpty and the princess, she holding up her long train and not caring at all that her crown was on the side of her pretty head. And then Bab, and Meg, and Dick, and Wiggles. There at the edge of the wood was Santa Claus's sleigh with his splendid reindeer waiting impatiently to be off. As they all climbed into the big sleigh, Dick looked back at the Red City. "The gate is open!" he exclaimed. "And they have gotten horses too! They are going to try to catch us!" "Never mind," laughed Busybuzz overhead, as the reindeer plunged forward eagerly and the sleigh rocked with the mad motion. "Never mind. They'll have a pretty time, horses or no horses, trying to catch up with Santa Claus's fastest steam." And then began the craziest, wildest, swiftest dream that anyone ever saw or dreamed of. The horses of the people of the Red City were the fastest in the world, but they were not so fast as the reindeer, and they never quite overtook them. But sometimes they seemed to be drawing very close, and then the princess would scream, and Wiggles would bark, and the reindeer would toss their antlers and go just a little bit faster. And the racing horses behind, their heads strained forward and their hoofs hardly seeming to touch the ground, would drop back a foot or two. The riders waved their arms and shouted, and once in a while the occupants of the sleigh could hear threats as to what would happen to them all when they were caught. On they went, on and on and on, and neither the horses nor the reindeer seemed to be even tired. The reindeer, indeed, seemed to enjoy the race, and their small hoofs actually danced over the earth. Suddenly they passed a barefooted girl in a green dress, who laughed and waved to them. "The Idle Princess!" cried Bab. "Dreams come true!" exclaimed Meg. "My fairy of fancy!" shouted Dick. "Shh!" said Busybuzz. "You don't know who she is, you foolish little persons. But whoever she is, she's going to help us now, or I'm very much mistaken." They all stood up in the sleigh to look, and saw a very wonderful and pretty sight. The girl in the green gown was fastening chains of flowers across the wood path, back and forth, so that the whole way was simply barred and blocked with roses and lilies and daisies and bluebells and hyacinths and sweet peas and every other delicious blossom that you can think of. Now, along came the people of the Red City, and the girl in the green dress slipped away into the forest. But she probably peeked a little from behind some tree and saw what happened afterward. The horses plunged at full speed into the maze of flowers that she had prepared for them, and however they might leap and push and struggle and trample, they could not get through the flower chains. You see, making chains of flowers happened to be the green-gowned girl's pet hobby, and no one in the world could ever break the chains she made. But just 2 riders did manage to force their horses through, and Dick, looking back, of course that check had given them a splendid advantage, saw 2 steeds galloping wildly after them. "She has kept back all but 2, he said. "Dear fairy of fancy." "But what are we to do with these?" asked Star, who was always worrying. "Never fear," said Busybuzz cheerfully. "These children have too many friends in the make-believe land for there to be any danger. Someone else will happen along before long and see that those 2 Red City persons have more trouble." Now, the 3 children had not realized before that they had made many friends in make-believe land, and the thought surprised and pleased them more than they could have believed possible. There was a little warm glow around each of their hearts, and they looked up at little Busybuzz gratefully. "Thank you for telling us that, Busybuzz," said Bab shyly. "Telling you," laughed Busybuzz. "You will not need to be told it pretty soon." Once more, the Red City horses seemed to be gaining upon them. Suddenly, 2 huge owls flew out of the depths of the forest and began to flap around the heads of the galloping horses. "Who are they?" cried Meg excitedly. "2 of your friends," returned the goblin. "Is one Moon Eyes?" asked Dick. Busybuzz nodded. And the other, he said, is the tailless one, the owl innkeeper. Oh, how nice of them both, cried Bab. They won't hurt the horses, will they? Oh, dear no, said Busybuzz. But they may succeed in driving at least one of them back. And indeed, that is just what they did. One of the horses shied and reared and finally wheeled straight about. The man fell off and, though he was not at all hurt, was so angry that he almost had a fit. He stood in the center of the path and shook his fist at the trees on each side of him as though he suspected them of having had something to do with it. The horse, with the owls after it, was running home to the Red City as fast as it could possibly go. The second rider had not stopped to see whether his comrade had been killed or not, and was riding after the sleigh faster than ever. I wonder what will happen to him, said Meg. Ah, little Miss Meg, said Busybuzz, you are beginning to trust your friends? Yes, said Meg with a sigh. But really, I don't think I should ever trust anyone again after the horrid time I had with Grump. Hello, exclaimed Busybuzz. There's Greenwings, the dragonfly. The big insect came humming into the sleigh and perched on the dashboard. How are you all? He asked. All right. Have you any news worth hearing? Said Busybuzz. Well, I've just come from the palace of the Wicked King. You know, I like to lunch upon the green flowers that grow on that big tree under the princess's window. I was sitting happily on one of the lower branches when a snail came crawling along the limb toward me. He paused impressively. Well, what of that? Said Busybuzz impatiently. There are many snails. Not many like this one. The snail seemed lonely, and though I hate all snails, I could not refuse to talk to it when it sat itself down beside me. It talked a great deal of nonsense at first, all about its departed glory, and how it hated the Wicked King, and stuff of that sort, but finally it told me who it was, or rather, who it had been before it became a snail. It was Grump. Of course, this does not surprise you, for you have known it all along, but it surprised the children tremendously. Poor Grump, sighed Meg. He tried to boil me down and use my soul in a magic sense, but I really think that I am sorry to think that he has got to be a snail for the rest of his life. Look, cried Busybuzz. Out between the trees, on their left, stalked a strange animal. Strange, at least, to all of them except Bab and the reindeer. Oh, stop the sleigh, cried Bab. It's my dear wooden cow. You can't stop the sleigh, said Dick. Look at that man on horseback who is still following us. I think that she is right, said Busybuzz. It is safe to stop the sleigh, for this beast has evidently been sent by Santa Claus to help us. The reindeer seemed to think so too, for they stopped short and even wheeled around. The wooden cow approached them with short, stiff steps. I have the honor, she remarked, to offer you my services. I have come all the way from the far north to help you. Well, there's no time to lose, said Busybuzz, looking at the quickly nearing figures of the man and the horse. If you can do anything, please do it soon. The wooden cow turned away and walked, with its own wooden dignity, to meet the rider from the Red City. Where it was quite close to him, it stopped and stood motionless in the middle of the path, and stared straight ahead of it at the galloping horseman. And a queer thing happened. The horse stopped short. The man on its back became utterly still. There was a sort of a pause, and then the same dreadful change began to come over both horse and man, which they had seen come over the Wicked King. They both turned to wood, and the expressions on the two wooden faces, that of the man and the animal alike, were so wicked and cruel and horrid that one could not feel at all sorry that they had been turned to wood. The wooden cow returned with slow and solemn steps to the sleigh. Her horn was still tied on with Bab's ribbon, and the top of her head was smeared in places with the sticky black paint and sawdust. "I hope that is satisfactory," she said. They all thanked her, and Bab leaned out of the sleigh to hug her hard. "You dear old thing," she said. "How sweet of you to turn up just now to help us." "Santa Claus sent you, I suppose," said Busy Buzz. The wooden cow looked hurt. "No one sent me," she declared. "I heard of the trouble you were in, and I came to see what I could do. I can usually turn people into wood when I don't like them, and I was grateful to the little girl who put on my horn and chased the mischief brownies away. Now that my duty is done, I will go back to Santa Claus's barn." "Oh, thank you, dear wooden cow," cried Bab. "Give my love to Santa Claus when you get home." The cow disappeared among the trees, and the reindeer started forward again. Finally, Busy Buzz pointed ahead to where a little clearing was shining in a soft sunset light. In it was a small, pretty cottage, from the chimney of which a thin trail of blue smoke floated up into the sky. In front of it was a gay little garden, and when Humpty Dumpty saw it, he almost wept. "At last," said Busy Buzz, smiling. Chapter 17. Mother Goose Once More. And so Bab, Meg, and Dick came back to Mother Goose's cottage at last, and brought with them Prince Humpty Dumpty and the Princess Star. It seemed to our three children, when they saw the cottage, that a very, very long time had passed since they left it to start upon their various adventures. It all seemed very natural and homelike, somehow, coming back to the quaint little house, with its bright garden and its latticed windows, and the door with its funny string latch. In spite of their excitement, and all their narrow escapes, and everything that they all had been through, a feeling of peace came over them, and they felt happy enough to cry when the cottage door opened, and Mother Goose herself smiled at them from the threshold. Of course, there was the greatest sort of rejoicing when she and Humpty Dumpty met after all the centuries of their separation, and after they had kissed and hugged and cried over each other, she welcomed the princess, and kissed her too very kindly. And finally she turned, with her very sweetest, gentlest look, to the three children who were standing together, silently looking on. "Thank you, dear children," she said. "You have served me very well, very bravely and very truly, and I am grateful." "Oh, Mother Goose," broke out Bab, conscientiously, "I'm afraid if you knew—" "I do know," said Mother Goose. "At this moment I am reading your eyes, and I can see every single thing that has happened to you all while you have been away. Not only what you have done, but what you have thought." She looked keenly at them and smiled, and they all hung their heads and blushed a little, for they were remembering the many times that they had been weak or forgetful or cowardly. "But," she went on, "knowing everything, dears, I still thank you and praise you, for you have done very well, much, much better than you know, and that," she added, "is something for you to remember. We are always a little bit better than we think, and so, when we are naughty, the best thing for us to do is to say to ourselves, 'Dear me, I'm not giving myself a chance. I'm really good. Why am I trying so hard to be bad?'" And the children never forgot what she said. "You will do well to remember it too. And now," went on Mother Goose, with a delightfully mysterious smile, "I have planned a little surprise for you." "A surprise!" they all three repeated, wondering. "Yes, I am sure that you do not want to go home without seeing again some of the friends that you have made here, and besides, I should like you to know some of my own particular friends, whom you should have met long before, by the by." "But, Mother Goose, who are they?" asked Bab. "And how are we to meet them?" queried Meg. "And where must we go?" sighed Dick, who was quite content to stay where he was for the present after all his adventures. Mother Goose smiled again. She quite beamed upon them through her gold-rimmed spectacles. "They are all coming here," she declared. "I'm giving a party for you, and everyone in this part of the world is coming to it." "Oh, what fun!" they exclaimed, clapping their hands. "How dear of you, Mother Goose!" "Who will be here?" asked inquisitive Bab. "Well," said Mother Goose, "I confess I am disappointed not to have the Piper family, Jack and Jill, and Contrary Mary, and the rest. Some of my best songs have been written about them, and I am devoted to them all. But they are away just now on a visit to a very remote part of the country, Toyland in fact, and I have not been able to send for them in time to get them back. Then the man in the moon and his pretty wife have sent regards. They have some party on the Milky Way, which they simply have to go to, so she says, and Hop-o'-my-Thumb is half a world away and is having one of his 7-league boots mended, so he is uncertain about getting here in time, but he has promised to make a great effort to come at any cost. But even without these specially good friends of mine, there will be quite enough to make things merry, and I do love a party, even at my age." At the same moment, Busy Buzz called from the door that the owls were coming. Mother Goose went forward to meet them, and the children were soon greeting all their old friends, Moon Eyes and his wife, the Lady Grey Wing, and the owl innkeeper, and several other owls whom they recognized as having been at the Owl's Inn on the night of the storm. Also the big white owl who had carried the little Witch of Silence to the foot of the ladder of light that led to the North Star. Bab asked him when he expected the witch home, but he merely blinked at her without answering, and she remembered that he never spoke. Moon Eyes and the owl innkeeper gave an exciting account of how they had chased the horse of the Red City man back to the city gates. "It's too bad to frighten the poor horse," said Meg, "but I suppose that it had to be done."
"Oh, the Red City horses are as bad as the Red City men," said the owl innkeeper, which is saying a great deal more than I like to say about man or beast. "And anyway," added Moon Eyes, "we didn't hurt the horse, of course. We just talked to him and persuaded him that he would rather go home than chase you." "Yes," laughed Tig, "I certainly should think he would rather go home with you after him as you were." Lady Greywing had brought with her the red squirrel whom they had met at luncheon in her nest. He seemed delighted to see them and begged them to postpone their departure from Make-Believe Land so that he could give them a real woodland party. He said that he had some friends among the frog family who were truly charming, and he would be so glad to introduce them. Next came Clang and Tinkle, the two musical goblins, and Greenwings, the dragonfly. And there were several fairies from the magical flower meadow at the edge of Fairyland. The Sandman, too, was there, and the wooden cow, who explained that all her plans had been changed by the invitation which had come to her from Mother Goose, and that she had put off her return to Santa Claus's country simply to come to the party. Most unexpected of all was the arrival of the Sea Kobold and Mudge, both dripping sea water but smiling amiably upon everyone. Mudge had a new set of scales, of which he seemed very proud, and the Sea Kobold had discovered that, with the overthrow of the wicked king, his glass lid had melted away, so the ocean was as good as ever, and there was no longer any sea of glass. Soon after this the strangers began to arrive, and such queer, delightful people as they all were. The children felt terribly ashamed of themselves not to know more about their histories, for they were evidently famous people, all of them, and it did seem dreadful to think that they might know all about them if only they had been willing to read a few fairy books now and then. There was one little old woman with cloudy grey robes and a huge broomstick.
When they asked timidly who she was, she answered with haughtiness, "I am the old woman who sweeps the cobwebs from the sky. Everyone in the world knows me." Then there were two lovely ladies with marvelous hair who came together. One explained that she was the fair one with golden locks, and the other said that she was Rapunzel, on whose yellow hair a fairy prince had climbed up to her tower window to rescue her. The three little bears trotted in together, and Puss in Boots followed soon after, and the four joked together about bowls of porridge until the three mortal children wished they knew what they meant. Wiggles made friends with them at once. Snow White and Red Rose strolled in with Jack the Giant Killer and the other Jack, who explained that he was famous for house building. A drowsy-looking lady, leaning upon the arm of a very splendid prince, announced herself as the Sleeping Beauty, and another charming person declared that her name was Cinderella, but that she was now happily married and did not sit by the fire and weep anymore. "No, I'm the one who does that," cried a voice just behind her, and a very pretty girl made her appearance. They all laughed and began to sing, "Crosspatch, draw the latch, sit by the fire and spin." "It's all Mother's fault," declared Crosspatch, going to Mother Goose and kissing her lovingly. "No one would ever have dreamed of calling me Crosspatch if she hadn't made up that silly song just to punish me for a fit of temper." Crosspatch turned out to be Mother Goose's own daughter, and a very merry, sweet little person she was. Mother Goose herself laughed as she greeted her little girl. "Never mind," she said. "Her temper is ever so much better since." Still, a third Jack made his appearance just then, carrying a piece of a beanstalk, and he was soon followed by a lovely lady and a prince who announced that they were Beauty and the Beast. "He doesn't look a bit like a beast," cried Meg, watching them. Crosspatch laughed. "He was only a beast until Beauty kissed him," she said. "I really must admit that he was pretty bad up to that time." A little girl who wore her hair straight back from her forehead carried a looking-glass and was followed by a pack of live cards came next. "Alice!" exclaimed Mother Goose. "I am glad to see you. I was afraid you wouldn't come, since you don't belong to my kingdom properly. I have always wished that you were one of my very own girls." "Hello!" cried a voice outside. "I'm here, Mother Goose, but I had to hop all the way on one leg. The shoemaker would not send me back my left boot in time." In came Hop-o'-my-Thumb himself, a very tiny person, but wearing one huge boot. They all laughed at him, but he was evidently very popular, and the children made up their minds to read all about him just as soon as they could possibly get home. More and more make-believe persons came until it seemed beyond all things wonderful that they were all able to get into Mother Goose's tiny cottage. But of course, in make-believe land, all things are possible, and as a matter of fact, in recognizing that, our three children had learned their last and greatest lesson. When all the guests had arrived, they had a country dance on the grass outside. The sun was setting, and the light was lovelier than any evening glow that poet or artist ever saw in the real world. The forest shadows mingled with the gold and crimson glory streaming in from the wonderful distant west, and the flowers in Mother Goose's garden seemed to glow like little rainbow lamps to light the feet of the dancers. And such a funny dance as it was! Clang and Tinkle got out their queer little lutes, and some sad-eyed Necker appeared, and a host of sprites and elves of all kinds took their places as the musicians of the occasion. And when the dance began, there was the oddest assortment in the way of partners that you could imagine. Bab danced with her old friend, the Sandman, Meg with Mudge, dear little scaly Mudge, and Dick with Crosspatch. Humpty Dumpty danced with Princess Star, of course, and Mother Goose with the Sea Kobold. Busy Buzz had the old woman who sweeps the cobwebs from the sky for a partner. Puss in Boots had the Sleeping Beauty, and the other beauty danced with Hop-o'-my-Thumb. The three little bears paired off respectively with Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, and Little Grey Wing. Moon Eyes and the Owl Innkeeper were allotted to Snow White and Red Rose. One of the three Jacks, the one who was accustomed to giant killing, danced with the wooden cow, and the other two were very well content with Rapunzel and the fair one with golden locks. The so-called beast flirted gaily with the fairy with whom he danced, and the dragonfly hummed cheerfully as he followed the measures of the dance with another merry elf. The red squirrel also danced with the fairy. At last, as the sunset radiance faded and the stars peered out far above, the music waned and died, and the guests, one by one and two by two, began to slip away, with a word of thanks to Mother Goose and a kindly farewell to the three mortal children. Those who were their own particular friends expressed a hope that they would all meet again some day. The others merely said that they were glad that they had met. Off among the dim woodland spaces drifted the make-believe folk, and Mother Goose and the children returned to the little cottage, lighted warmly yet softly by the flickering blaze from the fireplace. Chapter 18. At Last. And then Mother Goose called them to the table, where supper was already waiting, and they began to eat. The children were very hungry, and it seemed to them that they had never had such good things to eat in all their lives. But afterward, when they tried to remember what they had had, they found that it was a misty blank. Then after supper, they sat around the fire, and Mother Goose got out her spinning wheel and sang to them all the dear, wonderful, foolish songs that every child knows or ought to know. And she made a song about the rescue of Humpty Dumpty. You have all heard it, but don't you wish you could have heard it when it was first made up, as Bab and Meg and Dick did, by the cheerful little fire in Mother Goose's cottage? This is the way it went, and she spun as she sang. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Not all the king's horses, nor all the king's men could ever put Humpty Dumpty together again. I'm glad to say, she added, smiling. Mother Goose, said Dick, rather shyly, do you think that we could be pardoned now for not believing in make-believe things? I'm sure of it, answered Mother Goose. You are no longer stupid little unbelieving children with dull eyes and deaf ears. You have learned to believe in the most wonderful things in any world, which are the make-believe things, and you will be thankful all your lives. And do you know whom you have to thank for all this? You, said Dick. Santa Claus, suggested Bab. The Fairy Queen? questioned Meg. Mother Goose shook her head. In make-believe land, she said, there are many kingdoms, and we are all rulers in our own way. But over us all is placed a great and wonderful queen. She is the real ruler of make-believe land. Oh, who is she? cried all the three children. Can we see her before we go? You have all seen her, replied Mother Goose. Guess if you can who she is. They thought hard for a moment. The idle princess, exclaimed Bab. Dreams come true, cried Meg. The fairy of fancy, guessed Dick. Mother Goose smiled approvingly at them. Well guessed, she said, for you are every one of you right. Why, what, how? Gasped the three. Is she? You must have guessed that she was the lady who appeared to all of you, said Mother Goose. You all saw her when you were in Santa Claus's sleigh. We had forgotten, they declared. We were so excited. Oh, Mother Goose, was she the... She takes a great many shapes, this great queen of ours, said Mother Goose. Indeed, she says that no one knows, nor ever will know her real name. Sometimes she wears a ragged dress, and often she forgets her crown and leaves it at home. But whether she is an idle princess or a lady of dreams come true, or a fairy of fancy, she is always our beloved lady, whom I hope you will know and love too all your lives long, the dear, immortal, young, ancient girl, queen of make-believe land. Shall we see her again? They asked in low voices. That, said Mother Goose with a little smile, depends upon yourselves. To those who love her, she is always ready to come. But for those who forget her, or slight her, or try to live without her, she is careful to keep away. When you want her, she will be with you. Your eyes have been opened by your stay here, so that you will always be able to recognize her. Many people in the real world meet her face to face, but do not know who she is. But in all times of great happiness or trouble, in all summer nights or snowstorms, and in all your dreams and hopes, and later in whatever romance life may have thrown your lots, you will see her in her green gown smiling at you from under her little crown of stars. Mother, interrupted Busy Buzz respectfully, are the mortal children to go home now that their work is done? Yes, said Mother Goose, and looked just a wee bit sad. Yes, yes, of course they must go home. Come, my children, come and kiss me good-bye. She drew them all three into her arms and kissed them one by one. Then Humpty Dumpty and the princess said good-bye, and Star cried a little. Oh dear, sighed Bab. Shall we never come back to make-believe land any more? My dears, said Mother Goose, I am going to tell you something which you may not understand for a great many years, but it is true all the same. The real world, as it is called, is nothing at all but a very small corner of make-believe land. Then she drew them once more into her arms and held them close, and they felt themselves growing sleepier and sleepier, and the warm comfort of her arms seemed to wrap them round closely and happily. They felt as though they were in their mother's arms at home, and they knew suddenly that they had become nothing but little, little babies, and that their heads were nodding against Mother Goose's breast. And as they lay so in her arms, she began to rock them softly to and fro, and croon the queerest, quaintest little lullaby to them. They did not know in the least what it was all about, but it was drowsy and motherly, and made them think of night lights and bathtubs, and coverlids pulled up close and warm on winter nights. And then they knew that, whatever it was what they always seemed to hear when their mother used to creep into their room during a thunderstorm, just to see that they were all right and not frightened. Held so in Mother Goose's arms, they all dreamed, for they were almost asleep, that they saw a night-gowned figure stealing close and closer, lowering the light and softly mending the fire, and a dear dream voice whispered, Hush, darling, hush, it's only Mama, go to sleep. And then came a kiss as light as a breath. Their minds seemed confused. Was it their own mother or Mother Goose? They never knew, for the next moment, and before they had time to decide, they were all three fast asleep. When they opened their eyes, it seemed but one dreamy minute later. They were all three back on the nursery hearthrug. The fire was almost out, and Nurse was just coming in. Bedtime, dearies, she said. Have you been asleep already? Was it only fancy, or did they hear the faint whir of Busy Buzz's wings as he flew away? So it turns out that Humpty Dumpty wasn't just a clumsy egg after all. His story is much bigger than we ever imagined, isn't it? I hope you enjoyed uncovering the true story of our favorite wall-sitter today. If you loved this deep dive into history, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to join our Storytime family. Stay tuned because I have another exciting and maybe a little mysterious story coming your way very soon. You won't want to miss that story. Until then, keep reading and keep wondering. Bye for now and take care.